Short speech, 272 words to be exact, but it shaped a nation at a perilous time. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith, on assignment for Meet the Press, has a special report as we approach the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address.
We're at the Evergreen Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address somewhere around here, probably right over there. Of Lincoln and the speech, the Daily Cleveland Herald said he should not have said less. We do not believe any other man in the same number of words could have said more. Gettysburg, a brutal three-day battle of incomprehensible carnage. Until Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee thought his army was invincible. When President Lincoln spoke here 5 months later, the war's outcome was anything but certain. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The Gettysburg Address is not so much a speech, but a prayer, a reaffirmation of faith. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. Lincoln was speaking to all Americans, but his remarks had even greater meaning for African Americans. Scott Hancock is an historian at Gettysburg College.
I think for African Americans, the Gettysburg Address becomes more important over time. African Americans then and since, they understood equality and freedom to be linked, and to not just be legal freedom, but that it meant the whole ball of wax.
The Emancipation Proclamation had just been signed that January. Lincoln had doubled down on the moral promise of the Declaration of Independence. The war was a fight for America's soul. Lincoln said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." President Lincoln promises there is sanctity in the sacrifice of those who died. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that the nation might live. And Lincoln declares quite plainly that the dead have left the living with a great responsibility. That from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
You know, Lincoln's using rhetoric, but he's living the reality of it, as are Americans then, what the cost is of not having freedom and equality. We can use things like the Gettysburg Address and the Civil War and what happens here in the battle to understand what's involved, you know, what we may be called to do at some point. And ask the question, are we willing to do that? What are we willing to do to achieve freedom and equality?
A new birth of freedom. Lincoln is invoking a kind of resurrection. He is praying that the war that has broken the country in two, a war that will leave more than 500,000 Americans dead, is not the end of us, but a new beginning. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It is a prayer we still pray. For Meet the Press, I'm Harry Smith.
And Doris, you